Well, hello my friends, it's your old pal Jordan the Lion, coming to you live from El Paso, Texas. How are you today? Great! Well, Orlando's downstairs, he's here to pick me up, and we're gonna go out and have some breakfast, and then we're gonna go do some vlogging. Now, what I wanna do today for the vlog is I wanna go to the grave of a man that was killed here in El Paso, who Bob Dylan actually named one of his albums after. Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. Well, here's our choice for today. Orlando is bringing me to Leo's Mexican food. I'm in, let's do it. Well, it turns out this was a Mexican buffet, so look at that. What a breakfast. All right, so like I mentioned, we're gonna head off and we're gonna go see the cemetery where John Wesley Hardin is buried. We're gonna see the grave of the man who killed him, and then we're gonna go see where that happened. So directly across from us is Juarez, Mexico, and if you look, you can see the fence that's separating the two countries. Well, we've ended up out here at Concordia Cemetery, and it's gonna be kind of chaotic to do this vlog today because today is Dia de los Muertos. Well, here he is. Now, the one good thing about coming on Dia de los Muertos is this gate door is never open, so it's open today. Now, right above, you can see his initials, JWH, with a couple of guns going across the top. Now, here he is. Here's what's interesting about this guy. He is not only considered to be maybe the most violent and well-known desperado Wild West gunman of his time, but it's really bizarre because his name, John Wesley Hardin, he was named after the man that created the Methodist Church, and yet he would, in 10 short years of his life, go on to, as he would say in his autobiography, kill some 70-odd men. Now, they kind of dispute that. They say, well, they can only account for about 27, but he made his first kill when he was 14 years old. His father actually started the school in which John was raised and educated in, and at the age of 14, somebody drew graffiti on the outside of the walls of the school. Now, a classmate of John's accused him of doing it. They got into a battle, they got into a fight, and we're talking at the age of 14 years old. They got into this fight, and the kid ran at John Wesley with a knife, and John Wesley ended up stabbing the boy with his own knife and killing him. So his father said, you should go into hiding, you should go on the run, because what had happened is the area where they were living in Texas, he said that his father said that most of the police officers at the time were former slaves, and that they were not kind to people from Texas, and that John Wesley Hardin would never get a fair trial. So he went on the run after killing one man at the age of 14, and while he was on the run, 3 men came looking for him, and John Wesley Hardin killed them. So he had 4 men under his belt by the age of 15 years old, and basically what he said was, I viewed it as any man that was coming after me to torture me or to harm me, they were going to die. And so throughout his life for the next 10 years, he would get into multiple situations where he would kill men in what he would say acts of self-defense, but some people said it was just drunken gambling that led to a lot of this. Now, he also is kind of famous because he's known as the man who killed a man for snoring. John Wesley Hardin and 2 of his friends were traveling through and stopped at a hotel one night, and John Wesley could hear his friend in the room next to him snoring. So he banged on the wall and yelled, roll over. And the guy, you know, kept snoring. So in an attempt to wake him up, he fired a few shots through the wall, and the second shot actually hit his friend and killed him. So he went on to be known as the man who would shoot a man for snoring. And he even said that would, in his autobiography, he'd say that got blown out of proportion. They would say I killed like 20 men for snoring, but he was really only 1. Now, when he turned 25, he was finally apprehended and charged for one of all these various murders that he had committed. and he was sent to prison at the age of 25. Now, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison and made several escape attempts. They said in fact one escape attempt that he and the other prisoners made, they were literally hours away from digging through, they had made a tunnel to the artillery room of the jail. So he eventually kind of like fell into prison life, but he decided to do something with it. So he started studying theology. He became the head of the Sunday school, if you can believe that, and then he started studying law. Became a lawyer once he got out. After 17 years of his sentence, they commuted his sentence, and actually somebody pardoned him, if you can believe that. He was pardoned, and he had written his autobiography in jail, but they say that he was a drastic exaggerator, so you never really know what was truth and what was fiction as to what he was saying in the book. But they did say that he, when he came out, within like a year or two, he passed the bar exam. Once he had been pardoned, he was able to take the bar. So he eventually became a lawyer and then was killed later on. But one of the stories Orlando told me that was kind of interesting, I hadn't read about, was that one of the people that he was hired to defend was someone who had went over the border to kind of hide, and his wife hired John Wesley Hardin to defend him. Well, apparently they started having an affair, and when the husband was working his way back across the border, he was killed. Now what's interesting is that now John Wesley Hardin is buried right next to that man, and forever behind bars. Now we're gonna go see the grave of the man that killed him, and then we're gonna go to the location where he was killed. But there he is, the grave of John Wesley Hardin. Now, one of the other fascinating things about this is that years later, his family, like his great-grandkids, would come here and protest with an affidavit or whatever to have him removed. They wanted to take him back to where he was from, Nixon, Texas, but they got a court order here in El Paso to keep him here, and basically the El Paso order won, and so he will remain here. But they said that mainly what they think is that the reason that this happened, or why they were disputing and arguing this, was because he generates income from tourists. So if he's here, he generates income for El Paso, and if he's there, he would generate the income for Nixon. But for now, he will lay here, one of the most notorious gunmen of all time. He was killed at the age of 42. How about that? So right next to his grave, here's the man who was he was defending, that was killed crossing the border. Now on this photo, it actually says, it shows the woman that John Wesley Hardin was having the affair with, the wife, and then here's the man he was defending that was killed. And below here, if you read it, it says, rumor was that Hardin had him killed. And it says he was known as the Polish Cowboy. Martin Mroz. And then look on his grave, they have like a boot filled with flowers. Now Orlando is leading us off to the Constable John Selman Sr. So this is apparently the infant burial area. Well, here he is. John Henry Selman Sr., the man who slayed John Wesley Hardin. Now, as you can tell, killed him in 1895. Then he died in 1896. There's an interesting story about that I'll tell you when we get to our next location, but it's kind of crazy. 28 years of violence, 28 years of killing people and getting away with it. He was finally done in once and for all by this man. And it wasn't even necessarily an argument that they had. It was over John Henry Selman's son. I'll tell you that story when we get over to the site of where John Wesley Hardin was killed.
And if you notice on top of here, it was donated by the Western Outlaws and Lawmen Association.
You look fantastic. What's interesting about John Wesley Hardin is that I read that the only way he was ever apprehended was he believed that you could draw faster out of your vest, so he had his holster sewn into his vest, and when they came to apprehend him, normally he would have whipped those guns out and shot him right away and he would have won that and got away, but this particular time his gun got held up in his suspenders. So, well, we've made it to downtown El Paso, our next stop. Now take your time machine back to 1895. Here's where it all ended for John Wesley Hardin. Believe it or not, this man who had killed countless men over his lifetime finally met his demise here, what used to be the Acme Saloon. Now here, you can see that they've memorialized that killing here, where it says John Wesley Hardin, the West's most feared gunman, killer of at least 26 men, though in his autobiography he claimed to be in the 70s, was shot dead in the Acme Saloon right here on this site, August 19th, 1895. Now, what's interesting was they say, and if you read this, it says a little bit about John Selman. John Selman, basically how this happened was that John Wesley Hardin had a friend who was a widower slash prostitute, part-time prostitute, and she had been arrested for brandishing a gun. So that was actually, she was arrested by John Selman Jr. So when John Wesley Hardin found out about it, he went and confronted John Selman Jr. They got into a fight, an argument, and what they say was that John Wesley Hardin had pistol whipped him. So the very next day, his father, John Selman Sr., he was the constable here. He came looking for John Wesley Hardin. They got into a fight, had some heated words, and then John Selman walked away, but came back that night, walked into the saloon that was right here, saw John Wesley Hardin sitting at a bar stool, face forward, they say, walked up, shot him in the back of the head, killed him, and then once his body hit the floor, John Selman fired off another 3 shots. Now, on here, it says that at Selman's trial, a witness testified that if Hardin was shot in the eye, it was excellent marksmanship. If he was shot in the back, it was excellent judgment. So what ended up happening was John Selman went to trial, and it was basically a hung jury. So they were going to have a retrial, and during that time, John Selman was having a poker game with another man. They got into a fight, much like all of the past killings that John Wesley Hardin had. A lot of them broke out based off of alcohol consumption and gambling. John Selman Sr. was shot dead. Now what's interesting is that John Selman Sr. was shot dead while he was out on bail in April of 1896. John Wesley Hardin was killed in August of 1895. Now, when I read about this, they said that the day after John Selman Sr. was killed in April, the day after that is when John Wesley Hardin was buried. And I was sitting here going, well, wait a minute, we're talking 9 months. Where the heck was his body for 9 months? In passing, Orlando told me this story. He said, when John Wesley Hardin was killed in here, the saloon owner kept his body and would charge an admission for people to come in and see the body. He had it like laid out, whatever. And Orlando said women would come in and just like want to touch the body. They wanted, you know, some sort of superstition or whatever. And so his body was actually on display that entire time until they buried him. Isn't that a wacky end to this notorious gunman's life? As this plaque said, maybe the most feared gunman of the West. Pretty interesting. So now we're going to start working our way up towards the mountain up here, and we're going to get a little bit of a view overhead. Before you stands the city of El Paso in the valley of the Rio Grande, and across is the city of Juarez, Mexico. Now you see that writing on the hill over there? That is Juarez. And that is, Orlando was telling me that's one of those read the Bible type things. The God saves read the Bible. Alright, let's go down here and take a look. Check out this. It says the Rainmakers of 1891 working on the theory that explosives could cause rainfall because many war battles have been followed by rain. The U.S. Department of Agriculture conducted experiments in rainmaking. During a West Texas drought in 1891, the agency brought the experiment to Midland. With some success, desperate for rain, El Paso city leaders convinced the department to come here and try the same procedure on September 18th. Some 370 charges of dynamite and other explosives were fired from the heights of Mount Franklin, but no rain resulted. Only a heavy dew was reported. Wah, 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 wah. So I guess that would have happened up here. Kind of a cool scenic viewpoint. Now if you look straight across there, you'll see a red X. That is where Mexico starts. And right next to that is the tiny little Rio Grande River now. It used to be much, much bigger. You see that? Well, we just popped into Walmart so we could get a duffel bag to take back the shirts and hats that Orlando made. And what do you know? We came in here and I thought I'd seen every ridiculous invention that there ever was, but now I've seen probably the top of the list. The egg sitter. Just in case you had that moment in your life where you really needed to sit on an egg, here you go. And it's only $40. What a bargain. Ooh, try me. Ooh. But it does have a washable cover. Out of all the ridiculous things I've seen in this Walmart, this might be the only thing that does make sense. Ho ho ho! And here we are. Welcome to New Mexico, land of enchantment. Well, hi Blake. Here's where Pat Garrett lies. Masonic Cemetery of Las Cruces. Let's go, shall we? Well, here lies the Garrett family resting place. You can see right here, Pat Garrett Jr. Now he will come into play when we go out to where Pat Garrett was killed. But here he is. Pat Garrett, the man who probably most notably will go down in history as being the man who killed Billy Bonney. Billy the Kid. Now Pat Garrett was basically a man who held myriad of jobs in the government official. He was a marshal, he was a sheriff, he was actually one of Teddy Roosevelt's three, if you can believe this, back in the day, he actually had certified gunmen. And Pat Garrett was one of his 3 certified gunmen. So what ended up happening was Pat Garrett ran for sheriff and he actually won, but he got really obsessed with wanting to capture Billy the Kid and his gang. So he asked, even though he had won, but he hadn't been sworn in yet, he asked the sheriff to make him a deputy. And he wanted to go off and chase Billy the Kid. Well, he did. He then ended up getting them to grant him a marshal so he could cross the borders and chase him as far as he had to. So what he ended up doing was he got word that Billy the Kid and his gang were going to be crossing through, so they hid out. And what ended up happening was, as Billy and his gang were coming through, one of Pat Garrett's crew misidentified one of Billy's guys, thought it was Billy, and shot him. Well, that basically let everybody know that they were now under fire. So Billy and his gang got away, and the one man that was shot did end up dying. Well, about 13 days later, they said, or 2 weeks later, Billy and his gang were surrounded. Another member of his gang was killed, and Billy was apprehended and sentenced to be hanged. Now, 13 days after he was sentenced, he managed to escape. Well, Pat Garrett didn't give up, and Pat Garrett went looking for him, went questioning people, and when he finally got to the town where Billy was hiding, he went to question one of Billy's friends and found out that Billy was actually staying with that friend in a different part of the house. So Pat basically hid inside the homeowner's room in the dark, waiting for a moment to apprehend Billy. And Billy woke up in the middle of the night for some reason and went walking through the house, and he saw the shadow in the room, and in Spanish said, "Who is it?" And Pat Garrett let off 2 shots, killing Billy the Kid. That's how Billy the Kid went down. Now we're gonna head out to where Pat Garrett was killed, because there's also a pretty interesting story that goes along with that, where Pat Garrett and his son, after a lot of financial turmoil over their life, Pat Garrett's son leased out basically a ranch, and it was going to be a goat ranch, and leased it out, a partnership with someone else, and trouble ensued. So let's go out and see that. And actually, Pat Garrett co-authored a biography on Billy the Kid's life, which for a long time was the authoritative history and really all we had to go off on. But they say that historians have looked into a lot of the stories, and they think that a lot of those stories were possibly embellished or heavily exaggerated or didn't happen at all. Well, right off the side of the road here is the official scenic marker of where Pat Garrett was murdered. Now the story behind this is kind of hard to understand, kind of convoluted, but I'm going to do the best job I can to describe it. Basically what I understand it to be is that Pat Garrett had been dismissed from his government job, and at that point he was pretty much out of money, and he had mortgaged out his property, so he was basically going to lose it. And so his son, Pat Garrett Jr., went into business by signing on a lease for a property. Now he took on a partner named Brazel, and what ended up happening was they had, Brazel had like 1,200 goats, like a goat farm. And so as they were sealing this deal that they were going to be, working together, Brazel, they found out, was getting his money from someone else, and it was someone that the Garretts didn't like. So they basically tried to end the sale or end the agreement. So they brought in a mediator, and the mediator tried to mediate it, and basically what they came to terms with was that Brazel would relinquish his part in it, and he was going to sell it to a man named Carl Adamson. The stipulation was that, Brazel would give up his stake in it as long as he could find somebody to buy the property for a fair value. So he quoted that he had 1,200 goats, and as the deal looked like it was pretty much set in stone and they were going to be done, and it was a done deal and everything, then Brazel came back and said, "Oh, actually I have 1,800 goats." And Adamson then said, "No, I don't want to do this." So the mediator came in again and said, "There's got to be a way that we can work this out. Maybe you guys can get together and talk about it." So Carl Adamson and Pat Garrett took off on horses, and right here, Wayne Brazel claimed that he killed Pat Garrett and left him off the side of the road. Brazel went into town, turned himself in, and nobody would prosecute him. Now, it's went down in history, as you can see on here, that they say that Wayne Brazel was the man that killed him, and it says Pat Garrett, the Lincoln County Sheriff, who was shot and killed, or who shot and killed Billy the Kid at Fort Sumner, was himself murdered at a remote site nearby on February 29th, 1908. Wayne Brazel, a local cowboy, confessed to shooting Garrett, but was acquitted of all charges. The motive and circumstances surrounding Garrett's death are still being debated. Now, what they say is that, there was not really a lot of evidence, as you can tell if he was acquitted, to convict Brazel, which is why Brazel turned himself in. Now, what Pat Garrett's son believes that Carl Adamson actually was the one who killed Pat Garrett on their ride through here, and just got away with it. The Wild West, what a crazy history, huh? Well, look who brought Orlando and I out here. It was my friends that I met in London, the Smiths. Chris and Sean, thank you. I was told online that this was a really hard spot to find, and even Orlando said that's a really hard spot to find, so they voluntarily said, hey, we can just take you to it. So thanks to them, we were able to come to where Pat Garrett was killed. So now the gang's all going out to Cracker Barrel, and you guys are coming along. Now I was just told that these are called the Organ Mountains because they look like a pipe organ. I can see that. Look at that big bull. There's Big Daddy. Well, you just saw as we were driving by, we saw this gigantic bull and a muffler man holding a Big Daddy's flea market sign. But I was just informed that he has no arms. So let's go take a look at the armless muffler man. Oh yeah. Yep, he's definitely missing arms. Those are cool though, aren't they? There's one outside of El Paso that I was kind of wanting to check out. It's not a muffler man, it's a Uniroyal gal. But it was so far out of the way, I just decided not to do it on this trip, but kind of cool. Let's see what he has instead. Nothing? Yep, nothing. And El Toro says shop here. However, everything here is closed. But just to give you an idea of how big El Toro is, here's my hand up against. Thing's massive. All right, El Toro, have a good one. I'm off to Cracker Barrel. Well, we're detouring off of Cracker Barrel a little bit because Orlando mentioned to me that he had seen online a picture of where Pat Garrett was killed, and then it's actually like kind of out in the desert. So I researched it and found it. So we're gonna go back out and we're gonna try and find where his son Jarvis left a memorial rock in the exact spot. If you noticed on the memorial sign we saw, it said near here, so we're actually gonna go to exactly where he was killed. All right, so we're out here looking around for the actual Pat Garrett murder site, and they do say online you probably shouldn't make this trip unless you have a high clearance vehicle, which we kind of do, so we don't have to do the mile walk, but hopefully we'll find this rock that his son put out here. So as you can tell, there are a lot of dips and hills and stuff out here. We made it part of the way, and then we got to a point where we figured Orlando's truck might get stuck. So I just got out and I'm gonna do it on foot. So now we're just following the power lines. I feel like we should be on horseback right now doing this, you know? Like they did. This has not been easy, but I do believe we are almost there. I think it's right up here by this pole. We found it! Chris and I found it. Thanks to you, Chris, and your mapping skills, we found it. This, like I said, this was put here by his son, his youngest son, and you can see where he wrote into it, P. Garrett, going all the way around. There's a February date up here, and then we have a death date here, February 1908. This is not easy to find, I'm telling you right now. If you come looking for it, it's not gonna be easy, but we found it. The true death site, Mr. Pat Garrett. We're gonna go ahead and put a coin down, and whoever ends up getting this pair of 100 days of sunglasses, like I always give out at the end of every 100 days, your pair will be right here. If ever I have earned Cracker Barrel, after this, I think this is the time. We are definitely going to Cracker Barrel now. But I'll tell you this, if you do come looking for it, you'll know you're there when you find a very, very, very steep incline up a hill. That was our marker. Okay, the Cracker Barrel Old Country Store. I hardly ever get to go here, sometimes Arizona, but we're doing it tonight. Yeah, and Cracker Barrel's not just a restaurant, it literally is an old country store, as you can tell. Anybody need a bike? All right, we all got our food. Look at this gang. Lots of fun. We got a full table here. And I got the basically like the country fried turkey plate with macaroni and cheese, and this is kind of one of those things I grew up loving. We always have for Thanksgiving this green bean casserole, so I got it tonight. Bon appetit. Well, what a great day. Sean and Chris insisted that I get one of these cheer wines because they said it's the Carpetbaggers, one of his favorite drinks, and they had them at Cracker Barrel, so thank you. I will be trying that out tomorrow. Well, good evening, my friends. Wanted to send a big shout out thank you to Lisa Marie for becoming my newest Patreon, and what a great trip this has been. We actually are gonna take off from El Paso tomorrow and fly home to Los Angeles and go pick up the Joster. But I think this was an amazing day. We got to go see the murder sites and the graves of two really famous gunfighters. I mean, these are guys that are like that went down in history, and I think this personally, I thought this was a fun vlog. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Come back and see me tomorrow. We have something interesting planned before we fly out, and then we'll go see the Joster. Have a great night. Thank you all for watching. El Paso, Texas, you've been great to me. Have a great night, everyone. Goodbye.
Megatroid in Mega City, thinking that my world's so pretty. Oh, oh, wants to be the general, but I play custard singing, so oh, oh.